preachers encounter this text, they'll try to go and talk about one of the three people, because you really have three different stories, right? You have Matthew's calling, you got the hemorrhaging woman, you have the guy the Pharisee whose daughter died. And that's fair enough. There's a lot to be made about any one of these three people. But I think when you do that, you miss that there is another theme by the fact that all three of these happen on the same day. And that nobody's really happy with Jesus by the end of the day. Let me walk you through why. It has to do with who these three people are in their society at their time. So, we'll start with the tax collector. So, when you talk about tax collecting in the ancient world, it's not like an IRS agent is today, not that IRS agents are exactly the most beloved humans. It is in fact a lot more brutal. It's more like a wise guy from a mob than anything else. Because what the tax collectors do is Rome will say, I need so much money from this province. Do I have any third-party vendors that are willing to collect money for me? Okay? And you'll have this whole hierarchy get developed. If I collect money from him, who collects money from him, who collects money. Nice little pyramid scheme, right? And the way it would work is this. If you were the guy in the toll booth, like Matthew, you would go and you'd be like, who owes me money today? Sarah, you owe me money. Let's take money from Sarah. Now, you will have been told by the guy above you that Sarah owes you $20. But you got to have muscle with you just in case she decides to fight back, because I know Sarah could totally beat me up. She's much stronger than I am. I'm not kidding, guys. Okay? And so you need muscle to be enforcers, which of course you have to pay for muscle, right? And so you go and you say, hey, I want my $20. Now, if the guy above you needed you to collect $20, you've got to get paid somehow, so you collect 30, and you put 10 in your pocket. Now, when he told you 20, he was including his cut, and the guys above him's cut, and the guy above him's cut, all the way back until Rome gets the 25 cents they originally requested. Okay? That's how it worked. Again, more like the mob, less like the U.S. government. So he was a pretty bad guy. What he did, his little booth was able to be moved around. So he would have set up where he thought economic activity is occurring today. So if today's a good day to fish, he'd be sitting there by the pond. Oh, I see you caught 3 fish. Thank you for my 2. And so on and so forth. Furthermore, in the world he's in, he's not just doing this sort of sleazy thing in the first place. He's doing it for an occupying army. He's doing it for a country that has conquered you and is oppressing you. And he is one of your people. He has betrayed his country, he's betrayed his people, and he is collecting taxes for the enemy and doing that by stealing from his own folks. Everybody hates this guy. The hemorrhaging woman. Mosaic law would have said that she was unclean. By being unclean, she could go to no church services or the temple or get her sins forgiven. She could not be near any men, because if any men had touched her or even became sort of within her sphere of influence in any physical way, they would have been declared unclean and would have to go through rituals to get clean before they could go to her. This means she could not spend time with her husband. This means if she had sons, she could not spend time with them, and it had been 12 years. Imagine being removed from your child's life for 12 years. Doesn't matter where in your child's life, that's got to be horrible. That is what she's going through. Furthermore, what she's going through is she's living through the oppression, and good old taxpayer Matt over here keeps coming for money. And then you have the Pharisees on the other hand who are looking at her. Are they meeting her with mercy? No. Are they meeting her with charity? No. Are they meeting her with anything useful? No. They're mostly just meeting her with judgment. Because at that point in time, the Pharisees would have looked at her and gone, what did you do to get God to be this mad at you? They would have blamed the victim. Then you got the Pharisees, the hyper-righteous, good people who were anything but. They would have looked at Matthew as a traitor and a scoundrel. They would have looked at the hemorrhaging woman as a sinner and a forsaken peasant. They would have looked at themselves as superior and better, and everyone hated them too. We're getting a cross-section of that world. People living in complicated, confusing, and very morally ambiguous times. Surely if you talked to Matthew, he would have told you, hey, the next guy's going to collect a lot worse than I will. Surely if you talked to the Pharisee, he would have said, what am I supposed to do? If I come out against Rome, they'll just kill me. Surely if you talked to the woman, she would have said, the world has forsaken me. I'm just desperate. Statements we hear today from all sorts of folks. But what's really radical about what happened that day is that Jesus didn't just see their pain. Jesus didn't just see the label that they had been given. Jesus didn't just forsake them. He saw a child of God. And while he still saw the pain, and he still understood what they were doing, and he still saw the sins, he said, that doesn't matter. You're a child of God. I will heal you. He healed Matthew by getting him out of the darn situation he was in. He healed the woman directly. He raised the daughter from the dead. At the end of the day, it's not that he didn't know or didn't care who they were or what they had done. What it was he first and foremost understood that they are a beloved child of God. And everything else is a label of humanity. God has one label, child of God. It's really easy in our society to forget that. I love art, so don't take this as I don't love art. But one of the things that I just get annoyed, especially with theater and literature and movies, written or spoken art forms, is how often artists just go with archetypes. For example, me and my wife, when we were dating, we'd watch a movie or we'd watch a television show, and we'd get like halfway through it, and I'd say, oh, well, that's the bad guy, and she's lying, and the detective will figure out this person's definitely the murderer. And my wife would be like, are you watching the shows before me? Because that's Netflix cheating, and that is not okay. And I'd say, I've never watched a show, I swear. And after she had checked the history, she would believe me and say, well, then how did you know? And I would, of course, in my way, would turn to her and say, I'm psychic. And then she'd hit me. And then I'd tell her the truth. Which is, you can see these sort of archetypes. Anyone who watches enough TV can sort of start to predict, oh, that guy, like, why are we interviewing girl number one like 4 times in the cop procedural drama if she's not the murderer? Right? You can sort of do these things. Any of us who watch TV or movies enough, we can sort of predict the end, or read books enough. You can predict the end of some of them, right? That's because far too often art and artists default to these pre-programmed worlds in which they simply go with archetypes of individuals which are never true. They're never really right because it doesn't explain or dig into the true complexity of humanity that we are. Because we're more than any label we carry. When I first went to seminary, I got there, and the professors get a little script about each seminarian on your way in, sort of basic bio of who you are. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm eating in the refectory the first day, and I'm eating away, and 3 professors walk up, and they go, you Matt Hacker? And I'm like, maybe. I'm like, seriously? And I'm like, yeah, Matt Hacker. They're like, we understand you used to work in finance. I was like, yeah, that was sort of a gap career I had between, yeah, be quiet. I'm like, okay. They're like, we don't need people like you in a place like this. Because we don't need finance people. We don't need math people. We don't need that sort of element. And I walked off. Now, the reality is, there's a lot more to me, and you all get this, than my very short period of time in finance. But that is the label they got stuck on and could see nothing beyond their archetype of what it meant to be in finance. And couldn't see beyond that. Now, obviously, I did graduate seminary, but it's so easy for us to do that, right? To take one piece of information, one label, and try to make that the whole person in front of us, rather than seeing the beautiful, flawed, amazing, sinful, saintful human child of God that sits in front of us in that moment on that day. I've lived in a lot of places. I've done a lot of different things. And I'll tell you something. Whether or not you're in rural Nebraska or Pennsylvania or San Antonio, Texas or New Haven, Connecticut or downtown in Chicago, most people of most backgrounds, of most political affiliations, of most anything label you can come up with are simply good people doing their best, like just about everybody else. Living in a morally ambiguous world, trying to do what's right. And it's hard. They love, they struggle, they pray, they care, they mess up, just like all of us. These labels, they're not as helpful as we want to make them. Because they're so incomplete as to who people are. So as you go out this week, take a few minutes and ask yourself, are you really following what Jesus calls you to do in your relationship and seeing people first and foremost as a child of God? Or are you letting human labels get in between that?